Just one second. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you everyone for enrolling for the PAR workshop. And thank you so much, Dr. Anil, for having it with us. Welcome all of you on behalf of Your Dost Academy. Before we begin, I quickly want to introduce Dr. Anil to you and before I hand it over to him. Right? So, Dr. Vail brings a very unique perspective that is grounded in creativity and pragmatism. So, since 2016, he's been actively engaged in teaching new qualitative research approaches to students and faculty members, in fact, of various colleges like IIM Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Udaipur, TIS Mumbai, NIMHANS, NMIMS, amongst all the other prestigious colleges in India and abroad. He holds a PhD in Human and Organizational Development from Fielding Graduate University, California, USA. He's a phenomenologist by profession and by education, and he regularly coaches doctoral students on the use and deployment of qualitative research methods in the academic work. And he's been working on three very interesting research projects at the moment, which I'm sure you'll be interacting with him about through the course of the next 2 days. So I hope that you have a great 2 days ahead. um, Please keep it as interactive as possible, because that is how you will get to learn a lot from him. And I request some of you to maybe switch on your videos if possible, so that he can also get some feedback from your facial expressions, right? So
And
thank you so
and
much. And
and
yeah,
also, Samyak, just to piggyback on what you said, I
sure.
also wanted to introduce Akhila Nair
Yeah.
here. Akhila will be is a young lady who will be helping me moderate the session today. All right. So welcome aboard, Akhila. Also, and thank you, Samyak, for and thank you, Arama, for as representatives of Your Dost Academy. You've done a wonderful job of putting this thing together, for me improvising my PowerPoint and all of that kind of good stuff that goes with it. And it's not easy because I've been doing all this coordination work myself for years, and I know how much work goes into recruiting talent for when I say talent, I mean participants for such workshops. And those of you that have previously attended my workshops already probably know that I do not deliver a lecture per se. That's not my style. That's not how my brain is hardwired. So most of the work that I do is very interactive. So I will be calling, trust me, I will be calling upon each one of you to say something. And I'm not going to tell you when I'm going to call on you. So be ready. So there is no opportunity for you to sleep in my sessions. Just kidding. So if you nod off, you can certainly take our permission to nod off. All right. And so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kick off the session. And once again, welcome aboard. This is the first time I'm doing action research, or participatory action research, as it is called in the US. Or some people refer to it in UK as participative action research. It's basically the same thing. All right, and you learn a lot as Samyak said, by immersing yourself in this learning versus sitting back, sipping your coffee and enjoying a lecture. That's not what this is going to be. It's going to be an interactive, highly experiential session. All right. And again, I would like to thank Your Dost Academy for this wonderful opportunity uh, to bring me in as a guest today, to talk to you guys today and tomorrow, to talk to you about participatory action research. So with that, let me kick it off. All right, so we're going to be talking about participatory action research, or also the acronym for that is PAR, participatory action research. Okay, so just get a feel for that. All right, this is just about me. He's already talked about 20 plus years experience. I've coached nearly 200 doctoral students over the years on the use and deployment of very unique qualitative research methods. I routinely work with faculty and doctoral students, and occasionally with master's students who are in the process of applying for a master's degree program in India or overseas. I help them with the whole application process, writing the statement of purpose and things of that nature. So enough about that. I don't want this to become a commercial for myself. All of you probably know the kind of work that I do. All right. So let me go to the next slide. What we will cover. Okay. So what are we going to cover today? What is action research? Okay. You're going to learn that. What is participatory action research? So how are action research and participatory action research different? It's important for you, before we integrate concepts, it's important to be able to separate, discern the construct, right? So you get a feel for what each is, all right? A lot of people use participatory action research and action research interchangeably. That's fine, but it's important to understand that participatory action research is a different modality, all right, as you will learn. How does PAR, and I'm going to start using the acronym PAR. I'm not going to always say participatory action research, it's a mouthful. How does PAR fit into the research realm of qualitative research? So it is, as you know, action research, participatory action research are qualitative research methods within the whole array of qualitative methods, such as narrative, inquiry, action research, phenomenology, grounded theory, all of the other inductive approaches, discursive psychology, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of you are familiar with those. Who is this research? Who is this participatory action research, PAR, directed to? It's important to understand that when you're doing the research, who are the stakeholders? Who is your client? Okay. So it's important to understand, what is the research directed to? Who is it directed to? What is the critical role and involvement of participants? When I use the expression participants in this seminar, please understand that I'm not talking about the researcher. When I use researcher, I will mean researcher as in yourself, right? Who's going to be going into an organization with a contract to research. So when I say participants, now don't get confused with the expression participants as used in grounded theory or phenomenology, where participants are the folks that you interview. You do semi-structured, in-depth interviews with those people. They are also known as participants. But for the purpose of our seminar today, participants are the stakeholders, the employees, the leaders, the managers, the administrative staff, whoever is working within the organization, as separate from the researcher. Okay. Contracting. So we'll talk a little bit about both informal and formal contracting. All right. So everybody clear on that? Right. So what is action research? Okay. Action research is about reflection in action. Okay. Now, this may be an expression that some of you are familiar with, others may not be so familiar with. So before I go further, because this is such an important construct in action research, I wanted to open the floor and ask you to volunteer and say what you mean in your mind by reflection in action. Go ahead.
Sir,
Yeah, go ahead. Who's this?
sir, this is Akhila.
Hello, Akila, tell me.
Sir, so basically, I just wanted to ask you, since this would be an opening question, reflection in actual action, like is it supposed to be in the context of research work, or the sample size, or the population which we are targeting, or the study-based approach towards it? What exactly is the context of it?
That is a nice question.
Thank
I
you.
love it when I ask a question and you guys, rather than give an answer, you ask me another question. Ah, how courageous, how bold. That's amazing. So if everybody heard that question from Akila, so what is, when I'm talking about reflection in action, am I talking about reflection in action with for the research initiative, for sampling, for whatever, right? So to answer your question, Akila, we are talking about reflection in action as it pertains to the research endeavor. Okay, so all of those
Okay.
tasks, all of the activities that you're going to be involved in when you're conducting that research. Clear?
All right. All right. Sir. Yeah.
Okay. Or is it
Yeah.
clear as mud?
I'm just getting the.
Getting the hang
I'm
of the
just
lingo.
getting.
Okay. Anybody
Yeah.
else? Come on. This is a very important aspect because not only in this, if you're going to be working in public policy, if you're going to be working with social enterprises of any kinds, NGOs, reflection in action is a huge tool. Okay. It's a
Um,
huge tool to use. Go ahead.
Dr. Anil, Dr. Behel, good evening. I'm Tanvi Mankodi, your beneficiary of
Hey,
technology.
Tanvi. How are you, Tanvi?
I am good, sir. How are you?
Or shall we call you Dr. Tanvi Mankodi?
Yeah,
Now Tanvi
thank.
has been a friend of mine and a colleague of mine for many years and a wonderful student and a wonderful supporter of my work. So go ahead, Tanvi. So what do you have to say?
So, maybe based on at least whatever is there on the slide or whatever I've heard, maybe while we are in the process of doing the research, we are sort of contemplating and thinking during that, and making sense or deriving meaning out of that during the same time that we are doing research rather than later, something like that.
Yes. You're right. You're right. Because you could be reflecting on something. So if I ask you to reflect on this pen and I say just reflect, all right, we can all say something about the pen. It's a cross pen, it's this color, it's called gilded, whatever. Okay. That's reflection on, you're reflecting on an object, right? But the moment I say, I want you to also reflect on the process of reflection itself. Or I want you to say, I want to ask you, Tanvi, so if I were to say, reflect on your actions. So whatever action you're doing, in this case, your action is I'm asking you to reflect on this pen. So you're giving some reflection on this pen. But at the same time, if I say, reflect on the process of reflection or reflect on the process of action. You see where I'm going with this? Because this is a crucial construct that is very unique to action research, right? Because it's not just going in like an ethnographer, any other social scientist, or even as a quantitative researcher, you're going into an organization and you're making observations and you're talking to people and you're doing comments or whatever. Um, you become more of an observer rather than a participant. Okay. Here it's about participant observation. But this reflection piece, when you reflect on the process of reflection, and when you reflect on whatever actions you're taking, you have to be calling into question your own practice, right? You have to open your lens up to yourself. So that is why action research and participatory action research are also known as practice changing practice. If you notice here, can everybody see that? It's a practice changing practice, right? So what is the practice changing practice? Well, you might say it's a mouthful. So you are going in, and please remember that one of the basic tenets of action research is. You are not going there simply to make observations or simply to suggest some techniques to the organization, to the NGO, to the institution that you're working with. You're basically going there to make a change. That's why your practice, your action research practice, is a practice changing practice. And whose practice are you changing? Are you changing your own? No. You're trying to go in, intervene in a system in order to make a change in the system. And you might ask yourself the question, so what is the difference when it comes to practice changing practice? In difference between action research per se and participatory action research. And we'll come to that. But I first want to hear from some others here about what they understand by reflection in action.
Hi, sir. This is Arunesh here.
Hello, Arunish, how are you?
I'm great, sir. So I just wanted to think once you're saying like this, like reflection in action.
Mhm.
So do you think it can also be known as introspection? Introspecting about why
Okay,
and what?
not
doing.
quite. While I know you're tempted, you're seduced by the notion of introspection, and introspection can deep introspection, sometimes obsessive introspection can also mean navel gazing. Right? You've all heard the expression navel gazing. When you're so absorbed and obsessed with yourself, you're introspecting about yourself. So to answer your question, while it may seem like introspection, it is not what we are really talking about. When you say reflection in action, yes,
Okay.
you could be introspecting on your own actions, but that's not what action research is about. Action research typically is research that is conducted with an outside organization. You're not conducting research on yourself, Arunish, right? So if you were conducting research on an organization or going into an NGO, going into an institution, and with the notion of making a change in that institution,
Right.
that's when your action, your research endeavor, your research actions there come up for reflection. So you're reflecting on what you're doing there. You're reflecting on your techniques. You're reflecting on the process of reflection itself. So while you're doing the action, while you're making interventions, you're talking to people, you're doing a number of things within the organization as a researcher, you are you are not only observing what you're doing, but you're also critically reflecting on the process, on your own process of observation. So you have to be highly aware of yourself, highly aware of your feelings, highly aware of what is it that you're doing. Because if you're not aware of what you're doing, you could be going into an organization as a disinterested third party, trying to make a change, and there is no buy-in from the organization, right? Right. So, and if you look on this slide, in this schematic diagram, you'll see plan, act, observe, reflect. Plan, act, observe, reflect. Correct. So,
Hi, sir. May I ask a question? Sorry for interruption. This is Sai.
What is your name?
Sai.
Sai. Hi. Hello, Sai. How are you? Welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir. Nice to be here. I was just thinking about the reflection and action. Just wanted to check. I'm just thinking aloud. I know there is a discussion going on, but then is it about also the consequences that come out of the action? Because when we start questioning with our actions, it would for sure lead to change in the thought process as well. So is it also about planning for the consequences and the mitigation side of it?
Wow, beautiful observation and wonderful question. Did everybody hear that? So is it only about what is it that you're researching, your research endeavor, the methods you're using, the techniques you're using? But what
Mhm.
about the consequences? And I'll come to that. She, Sai, did you say your name was Sai?
Uh, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Sai. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I have the name correct. So you hit upon a very critical part because a part of participatory action research is concerned with critical theory. All right. And I'll come to that in a later slide. But I thank you for raising that. And I would like to hear, thank you for bringing that into the notion. Yes. So it's the whole gamut that we are introspecting on. Or I now see Arunesh has introduced introspection, and now I cannot get rid of introspection from my vernacular. So, eh, this whole process of reflection in action is about everything that you're doing there, including, of course, the consequences. All right. So, go ahead. Anybody else that would like to add? There are other people who've not spoken. How about you, Avantika? Okay, maybe she
Hello,
couldn't hear
sir.
me. Yeah, Avantika?
No, sir, this is Nanika. Hello,
Nanika.
sir.
Okay, go ahead, Nanika. Yeah,
I was just thinking like about whatever you were discussing, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I was thinking, can we say that reflection in action is also about thinking about why we are thinking about a particular strategy to bring about a change?
of course.
And
Of course.
mostly, as far as what I had known little about action research, it was about solving real life world problems. So, is this
Absolutely.
real life
Absolutely.
problem? So,
Yes.
is it about what are the biases or why we are thinking about certain strategy? Is it about
of,
thinking or taking a moment to think why we are thinking that
of
this strategy might?
course. Absolutely. All of what you guys have just said and shared is all part of reflection in action. You're absolutely right. You're thinking about critically thinking about why you did something, why you went into an organization, why you made a certain intervention, and what were the outcomes of that intervention. All right. Now, how could you have done it differently? All right. So that's great. Anybody else who has not spoken?
Good evening, sir.
Yes. Good evening. Who's this?
This is Stuti.
Nice. Hello, Stuti. How are you?
Good, sir. Based on what you've shared so far, for some reason, I keep thinking about methodology. And because when we're reflecting, I feel like, is it that we need to reflect much more on methodology to explore and sort of break away from the very sort of set uh, paths when it comes to methodology? And I know you said that it covered all aspects, but somehow I find myself thinking about that more and more.
No, as a researcher, of course, methodology is a tool in your arsenal because that's what you're going to be using, and you could be using a variety of tools as you go in as a researcher into an organization as an action researcher. Um, so it's not just the methodology, it's not just the tool that you use, but how you use that tool. How is your tool impacting others? Others meaning the participants, the stakeholders within the organization. Remember, you're going in at the request with an agreement with the organizational stakeholders, right? They've
Right.
invited you as an outsider to come in and get involved in this whole process of change, right? It's about change, right?
Right.
So it's not just methodology is an important piece. Absolutely, I totally agree with you. But in addition to methodology, there are many other aspects that action researchers get involved in.
Right.
All right. Great. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, I guess not. So just also remember, it is a theory and practice developed by Kurt Lewin. You'll probably all hear the name of this author, Kurt Lewin, in 1944. He was the one who was also responsible for developing group dynamics and developing a lot of stuff. I would encourage you to read Kurt Lewin's work, but he is the father of action research. Okay, and of course there were other authors and other researchers and social scientists and others that came into the picture and really developed. Paulo Freire from Brazil is one of them. There are many others. So we'll talk about especially Paulo Freire's work because it's really seminal work in the field of action research. And you'll also hear this expression: there is nothing so practical as a good theory, which is right here where my cursor is, right down at the bottom. And that's by Kurt Lewin, 1951, page 169. All right. So it's just important for you to understand that what you're going to be learning today is reflection in action. Okay. And what are you really doing right now? As I'm asking you these questions in this little segment, you're reflecting on this whole process, are you not? So when I'm asking you a question, what does reflection in action mean to you? Right? You're all, not only are you trying to answer that question, but are you also reflecting inside yourself about what does that reflection in action really mean to you as it comes to the action research? So this the whole process of planning, acting, observing, and reflecting, it all goes together in a cyclical way. All right. So let's go to the next slide. What is the primary purpose of
Sir, may I
participatory?
ask?
Yeah,
Sir,
go
may I
ahead.
ask a question?
Yeah, who's this?
Sir Pragya.
Pragya, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sir, I wanted to ask what we are trying to reflect in our action.
What are you trying to reflect on in your action?
Yes, sir, like reflection in action. So what we are actually trying to reflect, sir.
Okay, so rather than me answering that question, I've got some brilliant minds here that I'm going to open it up to you guys to share. So if everybody heard Pragya's question, how would you address that question for Pragya? What is it that you're reflecting on in that action? Anybody?
I
How would
would
you help?
assume that it is the plan of
Yeah.
that action.
Who's this?
This is Sai.
I'll say. Go ahead. So what is it that
Can you
Pragya
hear me,
was?
sir?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
So what is it
So
that
I was
Pragya
saying that,
was really inquiring? Go ahead.
yeah, I think she asked about, if I got the question right, what is it that we reflect on our action, correct?
Yes.
So I was just thinking that it is the plan of that action is what we reflect upon primarily.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to execute it? What is it that we are going to do with it, with the action?
Nice.
The framework.
The framework. Yes. Yes. So so the so so think of reflection in action as the difference between a detached observer and a participant observer. Everybody has heard those expressions in social science research, right? And also in quantitative research, a detached observer. Quantitative researchers who work with data, numbers, figures, charts are typically hands-off, detached observers. By contrast, folks that work in the qualitative realm tend to be more involved in the process of research. So they are known as more participant observers, and action researchers are very participant observers because they're not only are they participating in the research process by going into an organization, they're also making observations. But the moment you start making observations, Pragya, and you start reflecting on your observations and try to call into question what it is that you're doing and what are the outcomes of what is it that you're doing within the organization. How is it impacting the process there within the organization? How are people reacting to it? What kind of change you're seeing? Are you seeing resistance? Are you witnessing distractions to your interventions? People are trying to shortchange what you're doing because they are not, either they are not involved in it, or they are not they don't have enough buy-in into that process. So the purpose of PAR is to bring about a change in social practices. So change in social practices. So action research is a social practice because you are a social being. You're going to be working within a social setting, and your practices are all concerned with people. There are people practices. You're making a change within a setting. Even though you're bringing in tools, you're bringing in different techniques, but you're working with people. It's a people practice. So you're trying to bring about a change in social practices within a social setting. Okay? Right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. In contrast to action research, which tends to be researcher driven. Now let's understand this aspect. Here's where the difference comes between simple action research and participatory action research. In contrast to action research, which tends to be researcher driven by external experts. So an organization says, Pragya, we would like to bring you in as a researcher, right? To work with their organization in order to bring about certain changes, whether it's certain changes in the way people interact with each other, certain changes in the pay structure, certain changes in human relations, nightmares that the organization may be really having or experiencing. So you're brought in at the request of the organization as an action researcher to bring about change. Now, even though you are trying to get in and make a change, and how do you make the change? You talk to people, you have interviews, you sit in on meetings, you do all of that stuff, and then you're making recommendations as though you're the outsider. You're as though you're the external expert, which you are. You're a consultant. So it's driven by you. Now, here's the key point. In action research, the research is driven by the researcher. It is not driven by the participants. Participants, remember what I said, participants are the employees within the organization, the stakeholders within the organization. So by contrast, participatory action research is a significant departure from the traditional mindset. So the traditional mindset, when we think of action research, is the researcher comes in, spends up to a month, sometimes more than that, sometimes just a few weeks to make observations and then make an assessment and go out of there. Now, before I move forward, I want to make a distinction also between the role of an action researcher, not PAR, but just an action researcher, and a ethnographer. You probably have all heard the expression ethnographer. Excuse me. Ethno means culture. So ethnographers go into organizations in order to observe, understand, and work with the culture within the organization. They are sent inside or into an organization, they get immersed, they go native. You'll hear the expression going native. Going native means you become part of the organization. You are not an employee, but you're um, almost like an employee, because you're going in, you're mixing with people, you're sitting in on the meetings, you're mingling with people, but your role there is to understand the prevailing culture of that organization. So don't confuse an action researcher with an ethnographer. Ethnographers, yes, they can be participant observers, but most times ethnography is done as a process of observation, observing the culture of an organization from the outside in. All right. While action research is not, it doesn't have to do with the culture of the organization, even though that does from time to time come into play, because the director of the organization might ask you, so how are you experiencing the culture, the meeting culture, the way people interact within the organization? How are you experiencing all of that? And so please be clear in your mind that while action research is the goal of bringing about change within a social setting, you're changing a social practice. That is not the goal of an ethnographer. So don't confuse the two. All right. So let me go to the next slide. People are, okay, let me move this here so you can see it. Two important features of participatory action research. People living and working in certain settings, such as employees, are actively involved in all aspects of the research. Folks, this is an important aspect for you to understand. Then when you're talking about participatory action research, participative or participatory mean the same thing. You are expecting, you're going in with the expectation that all the employees, or at least the team that you're working with, is going to be involved in all of the aspects of the research, right? So you're not just going in to observe what the team is doing. You're getting involved, you're getting your hands dirtied as the researcher, but also the team members are getting their hands dirtied with you. So you're all working together in the trenches almost, right? So there's research conducted by participants, okay? By participants meaning the employees, they're conducting the research. So you guys are co-researchers. So by contrast with action research, where action researchers are the researchers from the outside coming in to make those changes, participatory action research is about getting involved, the employees getting involved in the process of research. Okay, and the employees can mean managers, leaders, administrative staff, janitorial staff, or whoever is involved. And it's usually the organization that will say that we would like such and such people within the organization to get involved in the action research process. All right?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, I had a question. Like in the previous slide,
Who is this?
So this is Akhila.
Akila. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So in the previous slide, we came across this line that there are actual researchers, like the research people who are like outside the area of study, and the people who are inside. So basically, participatory action research is only conducted, or is more effective, and the reflection in action is more effective when it is conducted by people who are in the process. Like for example, as you mentioned about the employees. And if it is conducted by people outside the arena, then it won't be that effective. Is that the differentiation?
Well, it's really, the jury is still out on that, whether action research by itself. how effective that is, because most research that used to be done until about 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, was all known as action research. It was under the umbrella of action research. And while some interaction used to happen with the stakeholders within an organization, and they were involved in the process, but they were kept aside. So it's what the outsiders are coming in. And so it's a point to reflect on why participatory action. Why is there such a major wave right now for participatory action research? Why is it important to bring in the voices from within an organization to join that dialogue, to join the research, to join the interventions? Why? So this is a good question, Akhila. Thank you for raising that question. So let me open it up to you guys. Why would it be so important to have the voices of employees and stakeholders within the organization to become a part of the research? They can say, hey, we are paying this external researchers, these external consultants, X amount of dollars. Let them go in and do their work. Why should we get involved in that? What would be the big advantage in participatory action research of involving those people within the organization? Anybody?
Answer, sir. This is Sai.
Yes, Sai, go ahead.
I think two reasons. One, I think by human nature, if I propose the change and I am willing to do it, then it's easier for them to do it. So the practices are easier adopted that way. Change management is easy if we involve them from day one.
Nice.
The point two basically is that, I mean, sorry, that's actually going to be on a funny note, but again, it's better to take the blame or the credit together.
Okay. Okay, nice. Anybody else?
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, according to me, in my opinion, like I think that only the employees would know the hidden layers, the hidden factors, or the actual problems of an organization. It's very easy to for somebody outside to make recommendations like hawa mein, but only the inner nuances, the actual problem areas. Uh, some things. Like in an organization, not everybody might be open about the problem areas because they might not want to like they might not want to annoy the superiors or something like that. There are many problem areas that only only when you interact or only when you allow participants to actively involve in the research, maybe the researcher can highlight that might actually affect the whole thing, the whole intervention, whether it might work or it might not work.
Okay, very, very nicely done. That was an amazing illumination of this problem. Wonderful. And what was your name again?
Nanika.
Nanika. Okay. So did everybody hear what Nanika said? कि rather than हवा में बातें करना, ये कर लो, वो कर लो, right? Folks that are already immersed in the organization, they know from day to day what are the real problems there. And by virtue of being involved so intimately in the organization as an employee or leader or manager or whatever, they know best what might be happening within the organization. What are the really Achilles heel of the organization? What are the real problems that nobody's talking about? What is the elephant in the room? This unknown or this taboo stuff that nobody is discussing that is holding up the organization in many ways. So they are aware of that. So if you're involving them into the process of research, you are creating an environment of what? What does it one is collaboration, right? Co-research collaboration. You're bringing in, so you rather than an outsider coming in and trying to make those changes. Now all of us are working together, us meaning the researchers and the participants are working together. So there is greater buy-in. Okay, if I can make a change here, right? Okay, because participants are insiders who as Nanika just said, because participants are insiders who own the discourse. They own the discourse. What does it mean by owning the discourse? Anybody? Yes, we can all understand buy-in, but what does it mean by owning the discourse? What is this discourse we are talking about?
Sir, I guess it simply means that they are part of the process, they're part of the plan, they're part of the whole daily routine, that the culture which the organization or any the situation is facing every day on day-to-day basis. So the information which comes from them is the first-hand information, and that is why their data is so valuable.
Yes. So they own the discourse. Discourse doesn't just mean conversations that are happening. Discourse also means what are the actions that are being taken? What are the interventions that are happening? So rather than saying, just picture this. So if I'm a researcher from the outside, I go in, "Ke bhai ye kar lo, wo kar lo, do this, do that," right? Because I feel that this is the way it should be. Okay, part of that process could be, okay, so Dr. Bell is an expert in action research. So if he's suggesting some changes, okay, we'll go with the changes. But sometimes there is not enough buy-in. Your heart is not in it, right? It's kind of like, okay, let me make the analogy. I'm sure all of you attend hundreds of Zoom conferences, right? Where the facilitator is coming in and going slide after slide after slide after slide, and before you know it, time's already up and nobody even got a chance to ask any questions. It's not interactional. You're not involved in the dialogue. You're not co-creating this seminar with me. You would just be simply saying, okay, I'm going to sit back here. I'm going to relax, listen to a lecture because, I thought I would learn something about it. But have you really come away learning? And what have you really learned? Yes, you've seen a few slides. Why even attend the 1.5 hour session? Samyak from your boss could just send you the slides. We could send you the slides and he could charge you the money to attend, and you could have the slides, or we could send you the recording of the session. The moment you get involved in this conversation with me, there is a certain element of buy-in that automatically occurs. And those of you that have attended my sessions, in my webinars, conferences, lectures, whatever, know that I get everybody involved in the process. I call upon each and every person to say what it is that we're talking about. So despite the belief that insiders cannot see things objectively, there was a huge controversy there that if you bring in insiders, they really cannot be disinterested third parties. So there was this notion there that because a researcher is coming from the outside, he or she is a disinterested third party, means there's no conflict of interest there, that their advice, their suggestions would be the most appropriate. They would be most objective. They would be most valuable. On the other hand, there was another school of thought. And as Nanika said, that the moment the employees are getting involved in that process of research, there is a certain amount of buy-in that happens. So even though people from the outside used to think that they are disinterested, they cannot be involved because there's a conflict of interest, they're part of the organization, and yet they're trying to make changes for the organization, they meaning the employees. That there's going to be a prejudice there, there's going to be a bias there, they're going to try to make changes that only help them and doesn't help the organization. That notion is fast disappearing in favor of participatory action research. So, despite the belief that insiders cannot see things objectively, it is found that they can act and reflect in a disinterested manner. So let me ask you this question. So if I were coming in and as an external researcher and I say, all right, Tanvi, you know, I'd like to ask you some questions and would like you to be part of this research endeavor. Here's what we are doing. So the language, my terminology changes from I am doing this to we are doing this. We, Tanvi, we are involved in this process. We have to work together. So even though Tanvi is a senior director in that organization that I'm working with, can Tanvi still be a disinterested co-researcher with me? So let me ask Tanvi, what are some thoughts that come to mind, Tanvi, if you and I were part of this research endeavor in the organization?
I think, Dr. Bell, it will be then maybe be disinterested if it's a collective effort. I would, because if my name is also being associated with the project, I would want to know what is happening. I would want to contribute, and if nothing else, then just to protect my reputation, and of course at a higher level to actually having contributed to whatever is happening.
Right. So this is not always true that because you're part of the organization, that you're always going to carry bias. That is not always true. There is a thing that you've all heard of in social science research, especially in qualitative research. It's called bracketing. So when we are researching, we keep aside our own assumptions, our own biases, our own perceptions, our own theoretical spins on something for the purpose of what? For the purpose of doing research. So when we are interviewing somebody as in a semi-structured, in-depth interview, we keep aside our framework, our theoretical understanding, our interpretative paradigm on the study phenomena, so that we can get the lived experience of the participants. I'm just making an analogy, and this is not what I'm talking about in terms of action research, but I just wanted to give you the notion of bracketing. So in a form, in a sense, it is bracketing that you're doing. You're keeping aside your biases, your prejudices, right? Your ways of looking at the organization, because you're a part of the organization. You've seen the culture up close. You've seen how things happen day to day, right? You have to keep them aside for the purpose of the research, because if you're not approaching the research in an objective way with me as the external researcher, then we are going down a different rabbit hole together. So yes, a part of you is always going to be vested in the organization because you're part of the organization. But there's another part of you that can remain objective. And that is the critical skill that we call reflection in action. So even though you're co-creating the research with me, in the act of co-creating, you're reflecting on the process that is unfolding. And the process that is unfolding has a variety of thoughts, perceptions, feelings, emotions of a lot of people within the organization. People meaning if Tanvi has 20 direct reports, if she has 20 managers reporting into her, who have 20,000 other views about the organization. So everybody has a very unique spin on the organization. Then Tanvi, if Tanvi co-researches with me on this project with a biased mind, how are we going to be able to really achieve our objective? So she has to be able to keep aside that and say, can we look at this problem situation with a fresh set of eyes? Okay. So I just want to thank you, Tanvi, for sharing that. So yeah, there are a lot of skills required. It's not anybody's piece of cake to just go into an organization. It's one thing to work with someone one-on-one, feels safer. But the moment you're working with a team of an organization, you have to have the expertise. Not only the expertise, you have to have the theoretical knowledge. Because what are you going to be relying on? Can you just take something from the back pocket and say, oh, you know what? Today I'm going to apply this, tomorrow I'm going to apply that, with no theoretical underpinning, no framework. So as I'm hearing myself talk about theory, I'm almost chuckling inside because I also have expertise in phenomenology, which is totally not anti-theoretical, but is a pre-theoretical endeavor where theory has no place other than when we make the final interpretations in chapter 5 of our dissertation. So anyway, that is aside. So does anybody want to say anything here before we move on?
Sir?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sir, I wanted to ask, sir, how we will make friendly relations or informal relation, I would say, so that they can be more open up with us. How can we do that? Yeah.
See, here's the thing, and this is a really good question. Okay, it really has to do with the culture of the place that you're working with, the culture of the organization, the culture of the country that you're working with. Okay, for instance, an action researcher going into an organization, I'm just giving you an example, not a hard and fast thing, but just for you to mull over. An researcher who's going into an organization in the US, all right, and doing participatory action research, there are certain boundaries within that organization that are strictly held, where, okay, I can come close to you, but not so close as to make me uncomfortable. Yeah, they can be informal. They can have a cup of coffee with you. You can ask about, so how many kids do you have? But you usually don't ask other questions. Like, are you married? Right? What is your sexual orientation? Right? So there are issues that people don't get into. It's a culture of the place. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. As a person of Indian origin, even though I've been in the US now for 31 years, when I go to India, it's so refreshing for me because everybody can hang loose, everybody can become so informal. And I love that atmosphere. So if you were working with an organization, now, of course, that is rapidly changing also. So some of the same Western ethos about space, about autonomy, has also come into India and other countries in Southeast Asia, where now, okay, so you might ask, so to answer your question, Chuba, you might get into the organization, you might want to think that if I get really informal with this person, I can get more data to work with. I can get more buy-in. But even in India, somebody may not allow you to become too close to them. So you have to be always mindful. You know, it's kind of like I heard, you know, years and years ago when I was much younger, you know, there used to be a common thing that they would say that if you don't know whether you should be or should not be wearing a tie, TIAE, at a function or whatever event, you're better off to wear a tie. And then if nobody else has a tie on, you can go to the cloakroom and take the tie off and put it in your pocket and fold it and come back in. So I use the same analogy. If you don't know what the culture is of a place, if you don't know what the boundaries are, it is better to respect those boundaries. Go with the notion that people are a bit formal. Don't approach the notion that people are so informal that they would let it all hang loose and that everybody could be talking about everything else. I don't know if does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Right, sir.
Right?
I understood. Yes, sir.
Correct. So it is better to have a little bit of formality, which can then get diluted with informality if the other party chooses to. But you, as a researcher, have to maintain that decorum, maintain the protocol, maintain the professionalism, maintain the space and autonomy for people. And sometimes, if you maintain that space, people come closer to you. It's a paradox. So the paradox is not always around if you become too informal with someone, someone's got to really give you a hug. Sometimes people, if you respect their space, respect their boundaries, respect their autonomy, they come closer to you. They feel that you are a respectable, honorable man or a woman. And remember, you're coming from the outside. You're an outsider trying to get in, trying to assimilate with them, trying to fit in with them. Are you not? So when you're trying to fit in, you have to be with your on your best behavior. Right? And it's very, very important for buy-in to happen. If you don't have buy-in, and you know, when I don't know who out of you are therapists, but you've probably all heard the expression therapeutic alliance with a client, right? So if a therapist is not able to establish a therapeutic alliance quickly with a client, whatever you are saying may be down, almost like water down a duck's back, because there's no buy-in from the client. Client doesn't feel safe with you to share his or her innermost feelings with you, innermost thoughts with you, right? So enough said about that. I tend to sometimes go into a different tangent, but I give you the benefit of my experiences, and also I learn from your experiences, from your questions. I think it becomes so much more fun to have this kind of interaction, because it's not all about me sharing with you what I know. It's about me being open to listening to what your reflections are on what we are doing together. Okay. Okay. So
Sir, can I ask a question?
go ahead.
This is Sai.
Go ahead. Who is this?
This is Sai.
Sai, go ahead.
I just wanted to check, being participative, does the researcher do influence the research outcomes? And if that is the case, is it good or bad for the organization?
Beautiful question. Say that again one more time.
Okay. Uh, Being a participative researcher, does the
Yes.
researcher get an option, or rather, can he or she influence the decision or the outcome? Is that good or bad?
It's not a question of good or bad. Remember, in qualitative research, get it out of your head whether something is good or bad. It is. It is what it is. All right. So anytime you're co-creating the research, anytime you're co-creating the outcome with someone, who's that someone? Someone is the participant, the employees, right? And you're the researcher. Anytime you're co-creating, co-mingling, you're going to be impacted by them and they will be impacted by you. And your co-creation is this research endeavor that will have the footprints of everyone that is part of that. So now the question you asked me, is it good or bad?
For the
If,
organization or the change that we bring in, not for the
oh my
research.
God, it is, unless everybody has a ulterior motive to bring down the organization, I would like to think that all stakeholders, everybody that's going to be part of this process, has the best interest of the organization at heart. Are they, have they not? So when you're working together, the product that you're co-creating is a product that has buy-in. It is a product that has some commitment to it. And if it is, and I'm in a later slide, I'll talk to you about the critical part of that piece. If there, and somebody earlier on brought up that what if the consequences are not what you expected them to be, right? So you had the best intentions of working together, creating this piece of research, etc., and you felt that it is not as impactful as you thought it would be. What happens then? It can happen all the time. The outcomes are not what you expected. Sometimes the unexpected can happen. And then how do you deal with the unexpected? Or is it all frozen, written in stone? Now we cannot do any more changes because the project has ended. Dr. Bell has gone his own way. You're back to your work now, right? No, that's not what it is. Good participatory action research is a discovery process. It's a process of co-creation. It's a process of observing, analyzing, reflecting, acting, all happening together. Okay, so let me go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to move this here. All right, so participatory action research. So here are some of the conversations that happen when you go into an organization and you're trying to do this. Now, before I get into this slide here, let me share with you that while most, I would say 90% of the times when there's an engagement for participatory action research, it is the result of a contract that has been signed. Between who? Between yourself as the researcher who's coming in, but also the members who are going to be part of the project. And then it is, of course, countersigned by the HR director, the CEO, whoever, because you know why? Because that contract is a sacred piece of paper. There's an agreement. Now, you might say, wow, wonderful. So everybody is signed up on that and said, wow, I'm going to be part of this project. Here are my responsibilities. Here are my goals. Here are the objectives for this, blah, blah, blah. But really, the most important contract between people is the contract that you don't sign. It's the implicit commitment to something. It's the implicit buy-in. Just because you sign a piece of paper, it's kind of like a marriage. You sign a piece of paper, go together in front of the judge or whatever, and you say you get married, and now you, okay, it's a piece of paper, right? But what is the real contract in a marriage? That you will be together until death do you apart. I know it sounds idealistic to all of my young folks out here. Well, guess what, guys? I've been married for, I got married in 1980. We're still together. So I'm a testament to that. But I know a lot of these marriages. So if the commitment is not there and yet you got married, what kind of marriage is that really going to be? It's a loveless marriage where each one of them is doing their own thing. And just for the sake of society, you say you're married. So likewise, if you sign a contract for participatory action research, and there is no real inner commitment, love, affection for the organization, for the work that you're doing, a diehard loyalty to the cause, that if I'm being brought in as a part of this project, I am going to give it my very best, right? That to me is more important than any contract you can have between people. And I'm sure some of you can agree. So I just want to open it up just a little bit to you. What do you think about this contracting piece? So if you were looking at this participatory action research, must work together. So this is what you say to the organization, must work together as its research team in conducting the study. Researcher would be just one member of the team and would have to relinquish some power. So if I come in, this is your organization, I come into you and I would relinquish my power. What is the power? My authority, vested in me by the organization. They're paying me a fee, remember, to do this action research. So they're giving me some powers. But I have to relinquish my power. I have to become vulnerable to what it is happening within the organization. So it's conducted by teachers, administrators, counselors, coaches, whatever the organization has, and other professionals to solve very specific problems. Remember, participatory action research is not just to understand the culture of a place. It is somebody earlier on had spoken about that when we do this project, action research for a very specific purpose. It's a time-bound project. It's not going to be forever, right? Strategy is to work in a complementary way together. This piece right here, such that each person contributes to the whole, right? So it's not just one person taking responsibility. It's not that I come in and hey, look, guys, I'm responsible for this. Therefore, please, let's do it all together in this way. My verbiage changes, like as I was saying earlier, from I to we. Let's work together. Let's do this together. Let's look at this piece together. And it takes a certain amount of maturity, but it also takes that ability to reflect on yourself, to become aware of what you're not aware of yet. It's not always what you don't know. It's sometimes what you don't know that you don't know. That's also important. So example, a group of teachers studying classroom discipline problems. So if I were in a school system, I was brought in for the action research. That's what we are studying together, remember. The researcher is not doing this alone. The researcher is doing it with the other stakeholders, the other teachers in the classroom. So on this thing about contracting, how important do you think a written contract is? And why is it so important? And if you don't agree, then that's fine too. But I'd like to hear from you. And especially from those that have not spoken yet.
Sir, may I?
Sure.
But I already have spoken, so can I?
Oh, then we are going to take some marks from you. We'll only give you 50% marks. How does that sound? Go ahead.
Okay.
No, I'm just
Uh,
kidding. Just kidding. Go ahead.
yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
First, tell us
Sir,
your name
actually,
again.
Sir Pragya.
Pragya. Okay.
Yes, sir. Sir, I think it is good to take consent of a person before, discussing any, like taking any information from them, because it's maybe for their privacy also.
Yes. Yes.
So, like every country has a different constitution and they have different privacy limits. So, I think it's good to take consent before conducting any kind of research.
Very, very good. Very excellent point. And that's why we all have heard of the informed consent form, correct? An
Yes, sir.
informed consent form is a formal document. It is not an informal document. It's a formal document. And thanks, Pragya, for bringing that up. It's one of my favorite pieces, not because it got a lot of verbiage in it, but it's because it it's sort of like a it's very sacred, because when you're going to be talking to somebody and you're researching, they should know, what are you going to be doing with the data? Is what I say going to be confidential, right? How long is this data going to be treated confidentially, or is it going to be released? And if it is released, my words are going to be used. Am I going to give my permission for the words being used? What happens if I have any problem? What happens if I become psychologically upset, right? Or if I have some other issues that come up, who do I go to? So that document outlines everything, right? So that's good. But anybody else? Why
Can
that
I add,
contract?
sir?
Yes,
This is Sai.
yes, Sai.
3 points. One, the contracts would clearly outline the outcome of the study, what is uh, the deliverables per se on the engagement, and what kind of documents or information they collect. So generally, I used to be with corporate, so we used to have a non-disclosure agreement where the data protection, everything comes in. So that's also covered in the contract, which Pragya touched about. And mainly it
Correct.
will have the deliverables part, so that we are very clear about how long is the engagement, what is expected, who are needed, when needed, etc. Everything, because we can't just like that go to every department and ask questions. So it considers all those things, and then it's there in the contract. That's why it's very important.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's a very, very critical piece, both the informed consent and also the memorandum of understanding, or whatever the firm wants to call it. And you know what? Sometimes it's a legally binding contract, okay?
Yes.
Because it's done by the corporate lawyers, because you're exposing your entire data to this outside researcher. You don't know what this outside researcher is going to do with the data. Maybe it is very private data, right?
Usually the
So you're
document is validated by the legal teams, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So this is a very important document. So, but what I was trying to say was, yes, that's why I said 90%, 95% of the time there will be a formal contract drawn up when there's an engagement of this nature, PAR engagement. But what is sometimes even more important is the implicit buy-in. So what is happening underneath the contract? You can have a wonderful, well-written contract seen by lawyers, and you can say, you know what? I'm not interested in this project. ये तो Tanvi madam ने बोला कि you have to be part of this, so I'm part of this, but I'm really not into it at all. It's a waste of my time. Don't you think that this person would be in some way, shape, or form pulling down the project in some way? So this buy-in has to be important. The buy-in just doesn't come from a piece of paper. All right, it comes from your sense of commitment, your sense of urgency, your sense of loyalty to the organization, that you're going to get, because you've been chosen to be part of that project, you're going to give the best of yourself to that project. So let me go forward with the next slide. All right, so I'm going to move this here. 5 things only participatory action research can accomplish. What are they? Practitioners, when we say practitioners, I'm talking about researchers. Particip Practitioners and participants can co-develop ways to understand problems from within the system or practice. So this is important. If a co-research, if there was no co-researchers out there, i.e. the participants, the co-researcher, I'm sorry, the researcher would go in with blindfolds on and not know what's going on in the system. It becomes so much harder to have access, to gain access to what is actually happening inside. But the moment you are involved, the moment you're collaborating with people within the organization, that becomes so much easier, number one. Number two, they all can speak a shared language, because the moment you get those folks involved, you're talking their language, because they're letting you in into their system. They're letting you in into their world. So there's a shared language that's developed, the shared vernacular that is developed. And they can mutually agree on actions and interactions in the practice. So over time, as folks discuss with each other, this is what's been happening within the organization. This is how we've been doing things. What do you suggest? Right? And they could be asking, they meaning the participants could be asking the researcher, what do you suggest? And the researcher could be asking the participants, hey, Pragya, Sai, Komal, what do you suggest? And that reminds me, Komal has not spoken at all. So I would like Komal to take a stab at this and say what the shared language means to her. So Komal, go ahead. I'm not even sure if she's here. Let me see. Okay, I guess not. So how about anybody else? What do you mean by the shared language?
Sir?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, sir, I think that shared language means the shared concept of a goal which they want to achieve, and that is knowing what is the problems within the system. So, like, while understanding that the shared language means the shared sort of mentality, a sort of concept which they all have um, uh, built up together with discussion and cooperation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, shared language, yeah, good. And that's how you create actions and interactions that are also shared,
Yeah.
because this is a product of what we all decided together. It's kind of like a teamwork,
Yeah.
right? And they can together develop communities of practice. So you'll hear the expression, I don't want to go into too deep into communities of practice. The community of practice are all for a common purpose, right? For a common goal, for a set amount of time. And sometimes communities practice can last longer. Sometimes I've seen action researchers or PARs going in and creating these communities of practice within the organization that becomes so endearing to people that they have propagated. They've gone on and on and on. These little groups that were formed as part of the project people working together decide that they want to continue even after the project is done. So you can create a community of practice. This is a really good feature to have. The most critical feature of PAR is to question one's interventions and outcomes while recommending suitable changes. Very, very critical point. And this is something that somebody had brought, and I forget it was either Pragya or Sai or somebody or Nanika had brought. what happens if you have a consequence that you created and it was not what you expected? Are you stuck with it? Because sometimes your interventions and the core research that was created, there was irrational elements in this. It was unsustainable. I mean, we created this piece, but it was not viable for the organization. It could not be sustained. It was unjust, right? It was favoring some people within the organization at the expense of other people. What do you do? Right? So, one critical aspect of PAR is that we can not only question our intervention, our meaning, remember, researcher and participants together. Not only do we question our interventions and outcomes, but we can recommend suitable changes around those outcomes. We can say, this is what we could do together to make a change. Let's tweak this document a little bit to make it more just, to make it more sustainable, to make it more rational so people can put their arms around that and be able to embrace what we are recommending over here. Okay. So that's a very important piece there. I just want to go to the next one. Okay, before I go there, okay, that's going to be, all right. So
just one question or clarification.
yes,
The
go ahead.
communities of practice you mentioned. So it is the group of people who could be piloting the changes, or group of people who would be the torch bearers for the practice. Is that right?
Okay, remember one thing in action research, especially participate in action research, we create an environment of equity and equality. So we don't create, yes, granted, there can be a formal leader of the project from the organization side. Remember, I was saying Tanvi, if she's the director, she could be the leader of that project from her organization. I'm the leader of my company, and I come in as the external researcher. So there's really no such thing as torch bearers. Okay. It is people who have created the change,
Okay,
who have
got
been
it.
involved
Okay.
in, yes, who have been involved in. Remember, action research is about bringing about change. It's not about resting on your laurels.
No, I mean, like say if we are doing this in a 50,000 member organization, right? So I will have to have champions for me internally so that the changes are monitored or the practices are implemented and followed, right? That's what I meant. Do we create that kind of a
Okay.
community?
Okay. Yes, that's a very, very good point you brought up, because you have to have people that, so when you, okay, so that is what you meant by torch bearers who are taking this forward, who are taking the
Yes.
lead to form this, where the community's practice is already formed, to take it forward. Who's going to
Yes.
take it forward? So yes, that's very, very important. It's a critical skill. So in that community of practice, more often than not, the external researcher is now no longer involved because he or she has already done the work and gone. But what is happening by creating that community of practice is that whatever changes we were trying to implement can go forward in a meaningful way within the organization, right? Because there's going to be a champion, like you said, a torchbearer who will say,
Yes.
guys, we came together for this purpose. We've done some great job. Let's keep doing this work. Let's meet at least once a month, twice a month, right? And let's keep in touch with each other. Nothing like it. It's a wonderful opportunity to do that.
Got it,
So
sir.
great.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So we are at the time boundary right now for the session. And um, before we leave for today, I wanted to ask if everyone received the case study for tomorrow. Samyak had sent the case study.
Yes.
Did everybody?
This is Tanvi
Okay, so
sir. I've received. Yeah.
there was a PDF. I'd like you to read that case study both with an open mind and also critically, because tomorrow's session is going to be totally involved with that case study. All right. So, does anyone have any questions on what we're going to be doing tomorrow, or for that matter, in today's session?
I would like to say the case study wasn't sent to me, so if anyone can send me, that will be great from your those.
Yes, if let's see if Arama can send it or Samyak can send the case study. I'm sure they'd be happy to do that. But if not,
Great.
I'm also happy to send you the case study. It's just a PDF link that I'll send you.
Okay, great.
So you can have that. But please, it's a very sensitive case study done in Toronto, Canada, with homeless women. Okay. And how these homeless women became co-researchers in the project. It'll just be so amazing to you how people that you feel are disadvantaged, they're marginalized, what is it that they can do for this? Believe me, they are the ones that make the most critical changes. Okay. And they could be the oppressed population, they could be the marginalized population, but when you bring them and make them a part of the process, a lot of wonderful change occurs. So before I end, I just wanted to open it for a few minutes. If anybody would like to say something, add something, suggest something, we'd be happy to listen to you.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. So I have a question. So, sir, basically, when we were talking about participatory action research, we were talking about organizations and other, basically organizations. So, sir, I just wanted to know, like, if this research, participatory action research, can be introduced into situations like, for example, sensitive areas, sensitive sections of our society, like surrogate mothers, or transgenders, or those areas, because like if like and how effective can it be, like if this is
Who is
the
the
if
who is this? Is this Akila?
Yes, sir.
Akila, yes. You're doing a very important part. As some of you already know, I'm currently involved in 3 qualitative research study, and that's one of the reasons why I'm losing my voice a little bit. Because since December of 2019 to December 2020, I did 25 workshops that I also uploaded to my YouTube channel, which I'll be happy to share with everyone. It's a channel on qualitative research. You can find a lot of good stuff, a lot of the lectures, seminars, interactions that we've had. But I'm doing 3 research studies, one on cross-generational communication patterns between Generation Z students and baby boomer educators who are educators in their mid to late 50s into 60s. The second study is on negative capability, which is a construct that was developed by John Keats, and it's applied to the therapeutic realm. Okay, in therapy and counseling. So we are doing that, and then the third one is on transgenders, the communication patterns between cisgender and transgender individuals, and 3 really exciting studies that currently are developing. And the first study, cross-generational patterns, we've already started interviewing um, a lot of the Gen Z students and baby boomers and all that. So we are having a great time doing that. But I just thought I'd put it in there. So I've been doing a lot of talking, so so I have to be careful with my voice a little bit. So somebody had raised the hand, Miss
Yes,
Iyer, I believe.
Yeah, hi.
Mamta Harish.
I had raised my hand.
Yes, go
Well,
ahead.
yeah, I am sorry I joined in late for today's session, which is why I was more of a listener than of a speaker.
That's
Nevertheless,
okay.
I had one query. The
Go
reason
ahead.
why I wanted to be a part of this workshop is because I wanted to do a PAR in the near future, and
Okay.
that involved my population, my office population, the communication patterns which kind of uh, contributes to job politics, and how we can establish a better pattern, better more empathetic and more understanding communication pattern by a
Okay.
thorough but understanding of each other and reduce job politics thereby. So
Okay.
that was
Okay.
my intention of joining this workshop. So if
Uh-huh.
is there any scope by which we can kind of design write a research design and discuss that with you tomorrow or something?
Absolutely. So what, no, I may not be able to do it tomorrow because not everybody will be into that or interested in that. What I can do is you and I can work offline on that. Okay.
Sure, sir.
All
Mhm.
right. So you can reach out to me. I can provide you with my email ID. If you want to note it down, it is Behal. A Behel. A
Mhm.
B as in boy.
Mhm.
EHAL at
Mhm.
email
Okay.
dot. So that's Abel at email, EMAIL, of course, email dot
Uh-huh.
fielding, FIELDING, fielding dot
Okay.
edu.
Dot edu.
Okay. So if you
So
were to write to, it
E
should just
Behel.
write to me. Yes, abahel at email dot fielding dot edu. I work very regularly with individual projects, and I'd be very happy to get involved with your project um, and um, and take it forward with you.
Sure, sir. Sure. And the other one
Okay?
is for transgenders. It is
Yes.
giving vocational guidance to transgenders and training them on different vocational guidance practices. This is with regards to
One
job politics.
wonderful. That is amazing. That is amazing. I try that falls right into my area of interest right now with the
Yeah,
transgender study that I'm currently involved in. So so yes, I'd be happy to work with not only with you, with anybody else who's wanting some individualized type of coaching, guidance, whatever. Okay.
sure, sir.
Anybody
Sure.
else before we wind it up? I want to be mindful about your time boundary. Okay. I'm okay with spending a few more minutes if you have any other questions, especially those that have not spoken. And Mamata, what is your are you on LinkedIn, by the way?
Yes, sir. I'm on LinkedIn.
Mamata, is that how you come up? Mamata Harish Iyer?
Yeah, Mamta Harish Iyer.
Oh,
MAMATAHARISHIYER.
okay, fine. I'll look up your profile there also. That's great.
Sure.
Yeah, so anyone else who would like to say something? Was everybody asleep? Are they all here, gone, with the wind,
Right
all
here.
disappeared? Come
No, sir,
on.
we are here.
Okay, so go ahead. Tell me.
We have already asked a lot of questions. I'm just keeping quiet. Thank you so much for the wonderful session, sir.
What's our
Oh no, no.
scope for asking questions during the session?
And I must apologize. And let me share with you in the interest of vulnerability that all because I've been talking so much, okay, and I do so much talking all the time with my clients and all that, that I started to get a little bit of a voice issue. with some acid reflux, but it's acid reflux in a different way. Usually acid reflux causes heartburn and all that. This is called LPR. It's a reverse, it's called silent reflux. So it can affect that voice. So it's a temporary thing, but and then the doctor said, talk less. I said, how can I talk less? But I do so many seminars. So I apologize if I was coughing away intermittently in that session. But I have thoroughly enjoyed working with you. And what's interesting and exciting to me always is about these sessions, how much learning I take away from these sessions, not how much learning I give to these sessions. And that to me is what experience is about. That to me is what participatory action research. It's kind of like, you guys are participants in this, and I'm sort of like, for want of a better expression, the facilitator or the expert in this field, but we are working together. I wanted to create a microcosm of what participatory action research truly is. It's this action of working together as stakeholders within the thing, right? So what we have created here today is not something that I have done. It's something that you have done and we have created together for hopefully other people to look at and take forward. So tomorrow we will be totally devoting to that case study. Okay. All right. And I will, of course, open this presentation at the last slide so that if there was something in the presentation that we need to look at, we can always go back and take a look at those slides. But most of the time we'll be devoted to that case study. So please take the time to understand the nuances of that case study, the sensitivity of that case study. I could have chosen case study with big heroes and leaders of organizations. I wanted to choose a disadvantaged group because they are the closest to my heart. Okay, that's where my feelings, my emotions come out. Okay, I see their plight, not because I'm feeling sorry for them. That's not why I do it. I do it because I want to try to understand how do they make sense of their lived experience. What does that lived experience mean to them? And in the process, hopefully I can do something for the social change, social uplift of some of these people. So that's what I've devoted my life, whatever time I have left on this earth, I've devoted myself to researching those communities. And so with that, I want to thank everybody again. And I thank you, Akhila, for being there as a moderator and also for asking questions. So you were not, in the true sense of participatory action research, you were not just an observer, you were a participant. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate each one of you, and including the ones who have not spoken. You are part of the community too. You were the silent observers, and you mean a lot. But the next time I would hope that tomorrow you would try to take a risk and ask some questions. Don't be bashful about it. This is our community. Okay. All right. So thank you so much and have a good night. I know it's late for you all. And for me, it's really, we've got 8 inches of snow outside the ground. And the temperature is how about 6 degrees below zero. So I've not even stepped out. Hey, India, when I go to India, it thoroughly spoils me. The weather thoroughly spoils me. The people spoil me and everything. So when I come back here, it's like, pin drop silence. Like you can't hear a word anybody is saying. So again, I really appreciate your time, your generosity with your thoughts and opinions and all that. And hopefully we'll have some fun tomorrow again. All right. Take care. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.